Jasmine Crockett took the opportunity to deliver a blistering takedown that left no room for misinterpretation. From the moment she began speaking, it was clear that she wasn't interested in playing nice or giving out any participation trophies. She stepped confidently into the moment, calling out the glaring gaps in knowledge that had been put on display, and did so with the kind of precision and energy that immediately commanded attention. There was no hesitation in her voice, no sign that she would pull her punches. Crockett knew she had the stronger argument, and she wielded it like a hammer. The way she handled the situation was almost surgical. She didn't just accuse her opponent of being wrong, she laid out a series of undeniable facts, pulling from historical references and constitutional principles in a way that made it impossible to argue against her without looking even more foolish. Every point she made wasn't just about correcting a mistake. It was about painting a larger picture. That understanding the foundations of this country isn't optional when you're speaking on matters of governance. It's a requirement, and ignorance in that arena is not only embarrassing, it's dangerous. Crockett's delivery was something to watch. It wasn't loud for the sake of being loud. It was controlled, yet powerful. The kind of tone that cuts through all the noise and forces everyone in the room to sit up a little straighter. She didn't need to shout to make her dominance known. She just needed to speak clearly and back up every single statement with a level of authority that can only come from genuine understanding. In moments like these, confidence isn't something you fake. You either have the facts on your side or you don't, and Crockett had them locked and loaded. It was obvious she had anticipated the weak points she might face, and instead of being reactive, she was proactive. Every jab was deliberate. Every correction was layered with context, showing not only where the historical error had been made, but why it mattered. She understood that history isn't just a set of dusty facts, it's the framework that shapes our current debates, our rights, and our very structure of government. By putting that front and center, she wasn't just winning an argument, she was reinforcing the idea that superficial talking points will always fall apart under the weight of real knowledge. There was an almost electric feeling watching the dynamic unfold. The tension wasn't chaotic. It was focused, almost like a trial where one side kept bringing evidence and the other side had nothing but empty slogans. Crockett never let the momentum slip from her grip. She kept pressing, exposing contradictions and misunderstandings in a way that was almost brutal in its efficiency. Every time a weak defense was offered, she dismantled it calmly and moved on, making it clear that she wasn't just interested in a quick sparring match. She was there to make a statement about the level of discourse that should be expected in any serious conversation about American governance. Another striking thing was how Crockett balanced passion with professionalism. She didn't devolve into personal insults or name-calling, which would have been easy in a heated moment. Instead, she kept her critique focused on the arguments themselves. It was the ultimate power move, to stay sharp, informed, and composed, while still completely overwhelming the opposing side. That balance gave her even more credibility, reinforcing that her command of the facts wasn't just a lucky break. It was the result of real preparation and respect for the topic at hand. Watching her speak was a reminder that there's a huge difference between simply having a platform and actually deserving one. Crockett showed that knowledge, preparation, and the ability to clearly articulate complex ideas are what separate serious leaders from those who are just chasing sound bites. It wasn't just about making her opponent look bad, it was about setting a higher standard. If you want to stand up and make bold claims about the nation's history, you better know what you're talking about, because someone like her will be ready to correct you with the full weight of truth behind every word. Her presence in that moment was undeniable. She showed that true leadership isn't about volume or bluster. It's about a mastery of the facts and the ability to wield them effectively under pressure. It was a clear, unflinching example of what it looks like when someone truly understands the ground they're standing on and refuses to let misinformation or historical amnesia slide by unchecked. Caroline Leavitt made a critical mistake that instantly shifted the energy in the room. It wasn't just a small slip or a minor misstatement, it was a complete underestimation of what it takes to engage seriously in discussions about American history. The error wasn't hidden between lines or obscured in complicated language. It was glaring, obvious, and impossible to defend once it was out in the open. And from that moment on, it was clear she had entered a conversation she was unprepared to finish. The first major sign of trouble was the lack of depth in her references. When asked to back up her claims or explain foundational elements of U.S. history, the responses were shallow, scattered, and noticeably thin. There was no connection to original documents, no thoughtful engagement with historical nuance, no understanding of how past events shaped the present. Instead, the answers relied heavily on buzzwords and broad generalizations, the kind that sound forceful for a moment, but collapse instantly under even the slightest critical pressure. It's one thing to get a date wrong or to mix up two historical figures. That happens. But what unfolded was much bigger than that. It was a full exposure of a surface-level understanding dressed up as confident rhetoric. The deeper the conversation pushed, the more obvious it became that she was leaning on catchphrases rather than substance, attempting to glide through serious topics without ever really engaging with them. It was like trying to swim across an ocean with nothing but floaties, completely unsuited for the task at hand. The more she tried to defend her position, the worse it got. Each attempt to clarify or double down only revealed a deeper misunderstanding. History isn't just about memorizing events, it's about seeing the connections, understanding causes and effects, recognizing the struggles that shaped constitutional rights and civil liberties. Without that deeper grasp, any argument about historical precedent or governmental structure falls apart quickly, and that's exactly what happened. The missing knowledge created massive holes that couldn't be patched with slogans. In the face of well-prepared counterpoints, there was no serious rebuttal. Instead of building a logical defense rooted in facts, she pivoted to emotional appeals and vague accusations. It's a common tactic when someone realizes they're losing ground, shift attention, create noise, distract from the weak foundation, but it never works against a focused, fact-driven opponent. Every deflection only made it more obvious that there wasn't a strong argument beneath the surface. It wasn't just a misstep, it was a full strategic collapse. What made the mistake even more damaging was the sheer importance of the topic at hand. This wasn't a casual debate about personal preferences or minor policy choices. It was about American history, the roots of the nation, the core of its laws, the very framework that continues to shape debates today. Fumbling through a discussion like that doesn't just look bad. It signals a dangerous level of unpreparedness for anyone claiming a serious political platform. Voters and audiences expect more than just passionate delivery. They expect competence, especially when it comes to the basics of how their country operates. The reactions were immediate and sharp. You could feel the atmosphere change as it became painfully clear that there was a fundamental lack of understanding being exposed in real time. This wasn't a hostile crowd looking for a fight. It was the natural reaction that happens when someone promises expertise but delivers confusion. Respect in any debate is earned by demonstrating real knowledge, not demanded through volume or repetition. And once credibility starts to crack, it's incredibly hard to repair in the moment. One of the biggest lessons to take away from this mistake is that overconfidence without preparation is a recipe for disaster. It's not enough to show up and speak boldly. If the facts aren't there to back it up, the boldness turns into bluster very quickly. Knowledge gaps don't stay hidden for long when real conversation begins. And once those gaps are revealed, every statement made afterward is viewed with more skepticism, more scrutiny, more doubt. There's a reason why serious figures in politics and leadership spend so much time studying, reading, and preparing. Understanding history isn't about winning arguments, it's about having a solid foundation to build future ideas upon. Without that foundation, every claim feels hollow, every promise sounds shaky, and every debate becomes a high-stakes gamble. What happened in that moment wasn't just a stumble, it was a full exposure of how badly things can go when someone tries to fake expertise on topics. The audience was completely locked in from the moment the exchange began. It wasn't the kind of moment that needed to be manufactured with hype or dramatics. The energy was real because the clash unfolding in front of them struck at something deeper than just political theater. There was a visible shift, the kind of collective realization that spreads through a crowd when it becomes clear that one side is thoroughly outmatched. Every time a weak point was exposed or a contradiction laid bare, the reaction from the audience grew sharper, more attentive, more engaged. There's a particular electricity that fills a room when people recognize they're witnessing someone command the stage with a blend of confidence, intelligence, and undeniable control. That's exactly what was happening. As the corrections and fact checks landed one after another, you could sense the atmosphere becoming more animated, more reactive. It wasn't just a series of casual observations, it felt like a steady unraveling that the entire audience could see happening in real time. Each time a historical inaccuracy was pointed out and dismantled with precision, a wave of agreement swept through the crowd, almost as if people were collectively nodding along, mentally, keeping score. The dynamic wasn't aggressive or chaotic. It was something even more powerful. A growing sense of certainty among the observers that the person delivering the corrections knew exactly what they were talking about, while the one being corrected was sinking deeper into confusion. Every pause, every pivot, every half-formed rebuttal was met with a silent but heavy judgment from the audience, and it only fueled the momentum further. It wasn't about cheering or heckling. It was about the kind of focused attention that comes from people witnessing an argument being won on the strength of pure substance. As the moments unfolded, there were distinct points where the crowd's reaction was almost physical. Shifts in body language, exchanged glances, small murmurs of agreement. These subtle signals built a collective understanding. It's a rare thing to see, but when an audience instinctively recognizes that someone has mastery over their facts and another clearly does not, the entire dynamic of a debate or discussion changes. It stops being a fair contest and becomes something closer to a lesson, a demonstration of why preparation, knowledge, and clarity matter. The emotional arc within the room also became clear. In the beginning, there might have been some benefit of the doubt offered to both sides. Perhaps the audience was willing to hear out both perspectives without immediate judgment. But as the mistakes became too obvious to ignore, patience wore thin. The crowd didn't need anyone to tell them who was winning. They could see it for themselves in the way one side stayed composed and factual, while the other scrambled to recover ground that had already been lost. There's also something profoundly satisfying about watching a serious, fact-based dismantling happen, especially when it's done with a calm, relentless style. The audience fed off that energy. They weren't reacting to cheap shots or theatrical insults. They were reacting to truth, plain, solid truth delivered without apology. Each accurate correction and each unflinching statement tightened the connection between the speaker and the audience. Trust was being built with every passing moment, and that trust turned into momentum that carried through the entire exchange. The longer it went on, the more the audience seemed to rally behind the person who clearly did their homework. It became a moment not just of entertainment, but of vindication for those who value real knowledge in political discussions. They weren't just impressed by sharp comebacks. They were witnessing someone hold the line against misinformation and weak arguments with grace and authority. It's a powerful thing to watch, when reason, facts, and preparation win, not because they're shouted the loudest, but because they simply cannot be denied. Every time a weak attempt was made to shift the conversation away from facts and toward emotional rhetoric, it only strengthened the audience's alignment with the voice of reason. It became a clear divide. One side was chasing distractions, and the other was pulling the discussion back to the real, verifiable points that mattered. That kind of consistency doesn't just win an argument, it wins the respect of everyone paying attention. The moment played out like a textbook example of how to dismantle a weak argument with precision and authority. It wasn't a chaotic shouting match or a messy back and forth. It was a clear, structured lesson in why preparation, real knowledge, and strategic thinking matter when stepping into a serious discussion. Watching it unfold, it became obvious that this was not just about winning a debate. It was about setting an unmistakable standard for what competent, informed leadership looks like in action. The way the situation was handled spoke volumes. It wasn't about rushing to the loudest retort or delivering rehearsed one-liners. It was about methodically walking through the flaws and contradictions in the opponent's statements, calmly exposing each one for what it was. Every response was deliberate, built on a solid foundation of facts and history, layered with the kind of context that can only come from a real understanding of the subject matter. It wasn't just about having the right answers. It was about demonstrating the depth of thought behind every answer, showing a command of both the facts and their broader significance. It takes real skill to stay composed while under pressure, especially when the other side is flailing to regain control of the narrative. Instead of getting dragged into emotional bickering or personal attacks, the approach was steady, almost surgical. Each argument was dismantled with patience, not with mockery or disdain, but with undeniable evidence and well-chosen words. It showed a mastery of debate that didn't rely on volume or dramatics. It relied on the strength of the truth, presented clearly and with full confidence. The contrast between someone who had done the work and someone who hadn't could not have been clearer. While one side stumbled through surface-level arguments, the other built a case brick by brick, each point reinforcing the next. It was a reminder that real power in a debate doesn't come from how loudly someone can speak or how passionately they can defend a bad position. It comes from being grounded in facts that withstand scrutiny. When you have that foundation, you don't need to dodge questions or rely on empty rhetoric. You can simply speak, knowing that the truth will do the heavy lifting for you. There was also an important lesson in the way the tone was managed. Staying calm in the face of weak arguments sends a message that can be more powerful than any direct attack. It says, without needing to be said outright, that there's no real threat coming from the opposing side because their arguments are so easily dismantled. That kind of composure is not just about personal style, it's about strategic dominance. It shows an understanding that the real audience is often the people watching and listening, and that winning their respect matters more than scoring cheap points in the moment. Every factual correction, every calmly delivered rebuttal added weight to the side of the conversation grounded in reality. Over time, it created a cumulative effect where even casual observers could see that one side was operating from a place of preparation and the other was scrambling to keep up. The difference wasn't subtle, it was glaring. It wasn't just a matter of opinion. It was a matter of who could actually support their claims with real evidence, real history, and real knowledge. By the time the discussion wound down, the example had been set so clearly that it didn't need any grand declaration. The audience, whether in the room or watching from elsewhere, had seen the difference for themselves. It was a masterclass in staying ready, staying informed, and knowing how to handle a situation where the other side tries to bluff their way through a serious conversation. The best part was that it didn't require shouting anyone down or resorting to cheap shots. The facts did the work. The preparation did the work. The clear command of the truth did the work. The lasting takeaway was simple. Real leaders don't just show up and talk. They show up prepared to defend their ideas against scrutiny, to engage with history and law with the seriousness they deserve, and to hold the line when faced with misinformation or confusion. They don't let falsehoods slip by unchecked, and they don't get rattled when faced with weak opposition. Instead, they stay grounded, stay focused, and let their mastery of the material speak louder than any bluster ever could. In the end, what unfolded was not just a debate or a disagreement. It was a powerful reminder of the difference between those who come prepared and those who simply show up. It was a moment that drew a clear line between surface-level confidence and deep, earned knowledge. The energy in the room, the reactions from the audience, and the undeniable shift in momentum all pointed to one truth. Substance wins. Facts win. Preparation wins. It's easy in today's political environment to get swept up in theatrics, to mistake loud voices and bold claims for real leadership. But what this moment demonstrated is that when the time comes to actually defend ideas, only those who are rooted in history, truth, and serious understanding can stand firm. Those relying on talking points without depth find themselves exposed quickly, and once that exposure begins, there's no hiding it. The room senses it. The conversation shifts. Credibility crumbles. The key takeaway is bigger than just one clash or one event. It's a lesson about the importance of being ready, of respecting the topics at hand enough to study them, to know them intimately, and to speak from a place of authority rather than assumption. In a world where misinformation and oversimplification are everywhere, the people who stand out are those who insist on doing the hard work, the reading, the learning, the critical thinking. They are the ones who can walk into any room, face any challenge, and hold their ground with facts instead of fear. There was also something deeply satisfying in the way that truth carried the day without resorting to spectacle. It wasn't necessary to shout over anyone or launch personal attacks. It was simply about letting reality speak louder than spin. That kind of strength, calm and unshakable, leaves an impression. It shows everyone watching that real power doesn't always come with volume. It comes with undeniable facts and the skill to deliver them effectively. Ultimately, moments like these cut through all the noise. They show that for all the political theater, for all the distractions, the people still recognize genuine leadership when they see it. They recognize who has done the work and who has not. They know when someone respects the weight of their words, and when someone is simply playing a role without understanding the script. And when it becomes this obvious, the impact lingers long after the debate itself ends. It's not about winning one argument. It's about setting a standard that others will be judged against moving